And Mr. Barrett, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. Minister, under Section 10 of the Act, you have the power to fire the chair and to fire the board. You just said in your opening statement that you'd taken all reasonable steps. I haven't heard yet that you fired anyone. Who have you fired?
I work on the basis of evidence. I'm a lawyer, and I would certainly caution members of this committee to apply due process when they're looking at allegations. That's why we have, the moment that was made aware of allegations, we had a third party to come to do a full investigation and report back to me.
Right.
And in addition to that, now there'll be a third party law firm to which whistleblower can go and report their findings.
Do you believe the whistleblowers, Minister?
Sorry?
Do you believe the whistleblowers? Your department has been briefed at length. The PCO has been briefed at length. Very simple question, yes or no. Do you believe them?
Well, listen, I believe in the evidence that I receive, and the evidence that I have so far is contained in the report for which you have a copy. That's the evidence that I have in front of me today.
Will you condemn Sustainable Development Technologies Canada for saying that the whistleblowers are lying?
I will.
You said that there should be due process. So they've already determined that what the whistleblowers are saying, in their opinion, is a lie. Do you think that that's appropriate of SDTC to say?
I think you'll have the opportunity to ask that question to the chair and to the CEO of the company.
Well,
I'll let them speak for themselves.
With all due respect, I'm asking you. You're the minister.
No, but I think the question is for the CEO and the board if they said that. What I'm saying is that me as minister, I work under the terms and conditions of the contribution agreement, which you've seen.
Right.
I work on the basis of the law which created SDTC.
Right, and that law allows you that gives you the power to both appoint the chair and members of the board, which you haven't exercised the ability to fire them. Their term is based on good behavior. I have another question.
Well, let me just say, it's for cause, Mr. Barrett. They can be terminated for cause. So
yeah, their term is for good behavior. What we've heard, sir,
for cause.
is what we've heard is their term is for good behavior. They're appointed. And it's based on the minister's decision. That's you. So are you going to guarantee the whistleblowers the same level of protection offered to public servants?
Well, the law specifically, and it's not me, as you would know, you would go back into the Act. Those employees are not part of the Public Service of Canada, sir. That's not me. That's the law that Parliament adopted at the time.
I could take some time to offer you some suggestions that would include appointing a chair and appointing members of the board who would guarantee the protection of whistleblowers who've identified gross mismanagement and misconduct when we're talking about more than $100 million in funding. So will you admit today that SDTC has seen rampant corruption through conflicts of interest and funding ineligible companies and projects? You talked about the RCGT report. That's listed in there. So will you confirm that you agree with that finding?
Well, I would say I find you're making a number of assumptions. As a lawyer, I would caution you to do that. The only evidence that exists on the record today is in the Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton report. That's the only evidence that exists today. If you are in possession, no, but let me say to you, if you're in possession of further evidence, I would welcome you to deliver that to me.
Minister,
and then we can have a fact-finding exercise.
You're in possession of the same information I am. It's more than 300 pages that the whistleblowers gave to PCO and furnished your department with.
I am not in possession of that document. When I'm saying I'm in possession,
you should. Well, I'm asking my next question. You should turn to your officials and ask if this is willful blindness that we're seeing, because they've been furnished with the information. In fact, we have members of your department in recordings that have been released to the public saying that they've seen the information and that they don't have confidence in the board of directors. So let's be clear. I'm not here for your legal opinion. You're offering me legal advice. I don't need your legal cautions. What I want to know is the date on which you learned of the whistleblower allegations about SDTC. Just the date, sir.
March 5th.
After the government learned, after you learned of Annette Verscharen's network of conflicts of interest and involvement in funding ineligible projects, did she receive any taxpayer dollars? Yes or no?
I don't understand the question you have. What I can tell you is that on March 5th, no, but if you want me to answer, I know you have another question. But
I do have a question, and you said you don't understand it. How can you answer it if you don't understand it?
No, break it down. I'm just going back to your question on March 5th.
Is the chair of the board. You have the power to fire her. We have heard evidence that Ms. Verscharen is in a conflict of interest and that her company has continued to receive funding including the Verschaeren Center receiving $1 million on September the 5th and $1.2 million on September 19th. Did you offer any comments that were supportive of the funding that the Verschaeren Center, named for the chair of the board, who serves at the minister's pleasure, did you offer positive comments about that funding, already knowing about the allegations against Ms. Verschaeren?
I see where you're trying to make inference and allegations and all that, sir. Let me make things very simple for you. I learned on March 5th, that's what at the time I was briefed by my official.
Yep, that
March
comes
17th,
before September 5th. Yep.
Mr. Chair, if you want, I'm happy to hear the question, but if I'm not able to answer,
I was just going to say, let the minister answer
I'm a lawyer.
Mr. Barrett, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Because if you want me to answer, give me the opportunity.
Let's hear it.
So what I'm telling
Minister.
you is that on March 5th, this is the time I was briefed by official. On March 17, I issued the department issued a contract to Raymond Chabot to do the investigation. On September 27, I got the findings of that. On October 3rd, that's where
I've got 10 seconds left, Minister. I would just say you heard about it on September, or you heard about it in March. Then in September, you went on to give positive praise for more funding to Ms. Verschaeren, who's at the heart of these conflict of interest allegations. You have the power to fire the chair.
that's it, Mr.
You have the
Barrett.
power to fire the board. Why haven't you fired anyone?
Mr. Chair, I would really...
Minister, that concludes this round of questioning. You went over by about 10 seconds, according to our colleagues in the Liberals.
I gave you 13 additional seconds. Mr. Villemur, you have the floor for 6 minutes and 10 seconds. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for being with us today. You are well placed in the government, and I will ask you questions on this. If we look at incidents over the past years, it's as if the government was not able to govern administratively. They're often subcontracting their obligations to third parties, for example, SDTC. And it's similar to what we saw with ArriveCAN and the We Charity. So, the subcontracting of government services. The issue that I see with this, and I would like to hear your opinion on it, this subcontracting shelters the government from accountability or doesn't offer transparency that would be subject to federal departments. And so with a lack of transparency and accountability, how can we do our work here? Thank you for your question. It's not my choice. The Parliament in 2001 adopted legislation. SDTC was chosen given legislation approved by the government at the time. They wanted some independence and transparency. That's in the legislation. That's not me saying this. It's a choice that was made by parliamentarians at the time. And Parliament adopted a legislation with different measures. And remember, some were saying that they wanted more independence. They didn't want these funds to be managed by the government. That's what Parliament had chosen at the time. And that's why I'm coming back to Mr. Barrett's colleagues and comments and saying that we need to be careful. It's in the legislation. It's not the minister that decides. And the contribution agreement lists the rights of the minister. And so following allegations, in this case, we required that the organization open their books and shared their HR practices. But in the legislation, it's up to that board and not up to the department and the minister. And so between wanting independence and with the other elements that I mentioned earlier, ArriveCAN, We Charity, well, it seems a little bit risky to have that kind of proposal. You could say that there are cases where there weren't any issues, and I agree, but is this perhaps an issue to have public funds administered by third parties? I think that we need to be cautious, and for SDTC, it's perhaps a lesser known organization, but they fund the most projects in clean tech, 500 companies, and they removed 7 million cars on the roads. We're talking about 20 million jobs since 2001. and I'm not saying this as a minister, as parliamentarians, we can say that it worked pretty well for a long time. And the regulatory framework and legal framework and I don't want to name organizations, but there were a lot of organizations in the different members' ridings, and over 20 years, people benefited from this legislation. I don't think that we can mix SDTC with other contracts. All right, I will talk about your department now. Our committee asked for a document that was unredacted from Raymond Chabot, Grant Thornton, and we received a redacted document. I think that they're avoiding their commitments. I understand the requirements of protecting privacy, but in this case, a redaction like this stops me from understanding the core of the issue. And there are less aggressive ways of anonymizing reports. And this is not a bad judgment here. I want to understand what happened, and the report doesn't allow me to do so. I am for transparency. There was a matter of health and safety for employees that were threatened. And so, as a minister, and the deputy minister can talk about this as well, we had to act with caution. We needed to protect privacy, but we also heard that threats had been made towards certain individuals. And so we had to be cautious. And I say this as a parliamentarian, we need to be aware of this. If there's a way to submit it in camera or in another way, I am all for the sharing of this document. I want to get to the heart of things, but I want to do things correctly while respecting procedural equity, but also health and safety. Because when I heard that some were threatened, well, we need to be aware as parliamentarians that we want to get to the heart of the issue, but we want to do it well. But if you use Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. C, Company A, B, C, we could have followed the logic there. We are trying to do things well. And so if you're saying that you want to see Company ABC, that's fine. But the issue was really the health and safety of some employees that were worried about their safety. Thank you, Mr. Villemur. Thank you, Mr. Minister. We gave you a good 10-15 seconds, Mr.
Second round
Villemur.
of questioning. Mr. Cooper, you have 5 minutes. Please start. I'm going to really go tight on the timelines here, okay? So go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Minister, I just want to clarify an answer that you had provided. Did you say that you do not have possession of a 300-page whistleblower dossier? Did I hear you right?
The department does. I don't.
Have you read it?
No, I don't have possession of it. The department has.
You haven't. You mean to say that you take this very seriously, but you're willing to take whatever action is necessary. You've repeatedly said you're a lawyer, and you haven't taken the time to review the contents of the 300-page.
Well, I'll tell you very simply, you're a lawyer as well. I'm not the fact finder. I'm the minister. There's people who, their job is to do the fact-finding mission. When they provide me with evidence, the only evidence that exists today, Mr. Cooper, I would tell you, is not the allegations that people have brought. Is the report from Raymond Chabot, Grant Thornton.
I thought you would have been interested in seeing that evidence as minister. And further to that, Minister, have you met with the whistleblowers?
I don't think it would be appropriate for the minister to meet with whistleblower because, as I would tell you, and you have legal training, the lawyer, I'm not there to do the fact-finding mission. That's why we have a third-party law firm, and we have Raymond Chabot to do that.
You have said that you need evidence, but Minister, through you, Mr. Chair, there is evidence, and it's contained in the RCGT report, which made findings that are damning, that you are downplaying, including $53,580,000 that was handed out to 3 companies who were ineligible recipients, a further $38.4 million that went out the door as so-called COVID relief payments, which were questionable, and in which of the 21 companies that were looked into, 6 of them involved members of the board who had conflicts of interest, 29% of the companies. So when you say that you need evidence, you have that evidence, and yet you haven't used the tools that you have at your disposal, including Section 10 of the Act, to fire the chair and fire the board.
I would respectfully disagree with that. If you see how it was qualified, Mr. Cooper, as a lawyer, it's called inconsistencies. This is not me. Those are the words of Raymond Chabot. They've not called that violation. And just for your information, let me finish on that, Mr. Chair. What we have demanded as well, but now we welcome the Auditor General. When we see that, we decided to do what was called a recipient audit, Mr. Cooper, because on the basis of that, just let me finish, because you need to go to procedural fairness in order to do that. So when we saw these findings, let me put that, I have called for a recipient audit, which is a full audit of everything under the contribution agreement.
Minister,
but I must just say, when the Auditor General decided to do her own audit, I obviously stopped that work.
I think you've answered the question, Minister. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
I'm going to turn to 2.3.1 with respect to the COVID payments, in which the RCGT report unequivocally states that the corporation's conflict of interest procedures were not followed, and that those members did not recuse themselves.
Yeah, I would, what you're citing, and the report speaks for itself. So, but what I would say, Mr. Cooper, I invite
It speaks
you.
for itself, and what it speaks to is a pattern of corruption, abuse, and mismanagement.
But I hope you will
at
question the
SDTC.
board and the chair on that, but I would tell you the rights and obligation. You're a lawyer. I would invite you to read the contribution agreement. It is very specific as to the rights and obligation and the terms of condition of the minister. And if we come to a material breach of the agreement, I can take action. But if you have further evidence through the testimony of people who are going to come here, I tell you, I'm willing to take any and all action that is needed in order to make sure that we get to the bottom of this.
Mr. Minister, we have been in contact with whistleblowers. You said that you want to follow the evidence, and a whistleblower has told us that following submitting the 300-page dossier to your department, that they had volunteered additional documentation and evidence that was refused by your department.
Well, I would,
30 seconds.
If you are in possession of any evidence, Mr. Cooper, as a lawyer, I would ask you to turn it over to us. Then we will look at the evidence. And not only if you don't want to do that, if you can give it to the third-party law firm or the Auditor General, sir.
They offered it to your department.
Well,
it was refused. It's no wonder they say that you and your department are more interested in damage control than getting the answers.
Not at all, Mr. Cooper, because I have said to everyone publicly that I will take any and all action based on evidence. You're a lawyer. You went to law school. I act on evidence, not allegation. If I have evidence of wrongdoing of any form or material breach under the contribution agreement, we will take all action needed, and we'll go to the bottom of this together.
Thank you, Minister. Ms. Khalid, you have 5 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. With respect, Minister, I know you started off by trying to brief us on your legal knowledge and trying to give us some legal parameters. But with respect, we don't want to hear about your legal opinion. We want to hear about your political responsibility as minister on this extremely important portfolio. Understood?
Listen, sir, I do my job, and I have a legal background, and I'm very proud of that, and I want to excuse myself to say for the record that I happen to understand these things perhaps better than others, because
you understood the question.
I'm a lawyer and I used to be managing ethics.
Sir, I got limited time. I will move on.
Sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. You've heard the concept of ministerial responsibility, right?
I'm very familiar. I've been Minister of the Crown.
Yeah, the buck stops with you.
I totally, but I would tell you.
You keep talking. No, sir, this is my time to talk. I haven't asked you a question. Okay? You talk about, well, that's not my responsibility, and they're going to be doing this review, or they're going to be making those changes, et cetera. But ultimately, they report to you, sir. The buck stops with you. And I know that there is a pattern in this Liberal government of ministers not accepting responsibility. I hope you're going to buck that trend and actually show real leadership and actually accept responsibility for this matter, because this matter has essentially been a year old. These whistleblowers come to the Auditor General and complain, not just one whistleblower, up to 20 whistleblowers, consisting of employees, consisting of senior executives. And I know that the SDTC likes to classify them as just troublemakers, but they're not. They received advice to prepare a 300-page informational package and send that off to the Privy Council office. That was done in February. Now, I understand through your evidence, sir, that you received notice that your department received that report in March, correct? That you did not review that report yourself?
Mr. Chair, can I answer the question that was like 30 seconds? Because, you know, there was a lot in this, by the way. The buck stopped with me as minister, but I would advise you, you might not be a lawyer, but to read the law that says what are the rights and obligations of the minister under the law, and I would advise you to read the terms and conditions of the contribution agreement.
Oh, believe me, sir, I have.
Because as
sir,
an arm's-length organization, sir, the minister by law is not allowed to manage human resources. That's how the act was
I'm not
created.
talking about human resources.
That's how the act was created,
I'm not
sir.
talking about human resources. I'm talking about the misuse of taxpayer money to the tune of $150 million.
Provide me the evidence of that, sir.
You want evidence? Take a look. Take a look at the three.
Provide me the evidence, because
sir,
the only evidence
we
that
speak
exists
one at a time.
is the Raymond Chabot.
You want evidence, sir?
If you have evidence, provide it to
Mr.
me,
Brock,
sir.
Minister, just hang on a sec, okay? Let's get one person talking at a time.
You want
here.
evidence?
I understand it's emotional. Mr. Brock, you have the floor. You have the floor. Go ahead.
I suggest if you want evidence, you actually show some responsibility and read that 300-page report which listed all of the improper payments that went to companies that did not adhere to the contribution agreement number 9 that you keep referring to, that forms the basis of your legal obligations. I encourage you to do that, sir. Or did you, in fact, just receive a briefing from someone in your department about that 300-page report?
With respect, Chair, how can you say that they don't respect the contract? Have you done the forensic audit? I mean, there's people who have done forensic audit. I'm not sure you have done that, but Raymond Chabot did a forensic audit, sir. And that's not the conclusion they reached. That's what I'm saying. You have to work on the basis of evidence and have due process and procedural fairness, sir, because if you're going to say things like that, sir, I'll tell you something. If you're going to say things like that, you have to make sure that what you say is backed by evidence.
Thank you for that advice. Have you ever contemplated why the Auditor General is actually involved?
Yes, because we've been working with them.
Because they feel that you didn't do your job.
That's not at all. Ask them.
All right?
Ask them,
That's
sir.
exactly what
Ask
they're
them,
saying.
because we work with them and we welcome their investigation, sir.
People need to be held accountable. People need to be fired. You've done absolutely nothing, despite claiming you're taking this so seriously. You've got your ADM in your own department claiming that you were going to freak out, that changes had to be made, that the board had to be replaced. You did absolutely nothing, sir, between March and October. Did you actually have meetings with your ADM to talk about this issue in that time frame?
Mr. Chair, I would say I work on the basis of evidence. What the members
Sir, did you
talking
have
is about
conversations with your ADM?
And I would advise you
Brock,
should take legal
time is up.
advice before you make these allegations, sir,
Thank you,
because
Minister.
the only evidence that
Thank
exists
you.
is in the Raymond Chabot